has changed much, which has changed much about the way we live and have interacted with one another for the past year and a half. I think all of us have gone through periods of heightened anxiety and concern about what this means for us. We've gone from cheering for frontline healthcare workers to protesting their places of work. And so it's an interesting time and place that we find ourselves in. In many ways, we perhaps see a fragmented Canada. And that's what elections in many ways are about, not the fragmented nature of that, but about the different visions and ideas we have about what it means to be Canadian and how we then would live with one another. The housing sector is also fragmented, with many not only asking questions of whether housing is affordable, but is it even attainable? And it's to those questions that we will turn our attention to this morning. I'll go over briefly with you the format for the meeting. There are 5 predetermined questions that the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee determined and sent out to the committee, or to the candidates, sorry. The order that they'll be answering those questions has been predetermined, and we'll just be staggering through the candidates list, allowing each candidate the opportunity to answer one of the questions first and to have an opportunity to answer one of the questions last. I'll read those questions so that you, the audience member, are to hear them, and then each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. After the prepared questions, we will open the floor to you, the audience, to ask your questions. And I would draw your attention to the bottom chat pane on Zoom, where you will see a Q&A tab. Please use that function to submit your questions. It is likely that we will have many questions that are somewhat similar in nature, and so you may not hear the exact wording of your question, but within the time limit that we have, we'll be doing our best to have as many of those questions asked. So please use the Q&A function to submit your questions. There are timekeepers working behind the scenes, and timekeeping will be strictly enforced because we want to wrap up our meeting at 11:30 in respect for everyone's time. I would ask audience members to refrain from using the chat function when the candidates are speaking, as this is how we're going to be advising the candidates that they're coming up towards the end of their pre-allotted amount of time on certain questions. If during the general question and answer period, an audience member directs a question to a specific candidate, other candidates will have an equal amount of time to respond if they so choose. All candidates are asked to end their remarks immediately upon being muted, which is the way we need to do things with Zoom. And at the end of our time together, each candidate will have 3 minutes for final remarks. That being said, we're going to turn now to the first of our questions that have been written by the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm just trying to pull them up here on my other screen. So that the audience is aware, the order that we're going to be going through with each candidate is for question 1, starting with the Conservative candidate, then the Liberal, NDP, PPC, and Green candidate, and then we'll be staggering our way through that, and I will let each candidate know that it's their turn to come up and speak, and at that point you can unmute your microphone and go forward with your response to the question. You do have 2 minutes to answer each of these questions. Question number 1 is as follows. What is your understanding of the need for affordable housing in Northumberland County? What do you think are the most important solutions to address this need? And so, Philip, you have the floor for this first question.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues, as well as Mr. Ellis and Ms. McDonald for organizing this. And we are truly blessed to have such great, high quality people helping in this important times. Before going into the significant and serious housing crisis faced by Northumberland, Peterborough South, rates of 0% availability, 99.9% occupancy, homelessness, challenges throughout our area. But it was really as the time as a member of parliament, specifically during the pandemic, where I really became aware of how how serious and significant these problems are. And I'll give you one example. We actually had a gentleman who wanted assistance with some government programs. And we asked him, okay, well, what is your address? And he didn't have one. He was without housing. And he was actually entitled to a fair bit of government support. However, without an address, he could not, without housing, he could not file that paperwork to get it done. We were able to get him the government support he was otherwise entitled to, which put him in a position where he could acquire housing. He had financial means, but then actually achieving that housing, it was still a difficult task. These are real people's lives, and it's a huge challenge going forward. In terms of solution, I'll be open and honest. I think there are some great solutions in all of the parties' platforms. I like some of the density stuff in the Green Party, and maybe as a minority, maybe if we do have a minority parliament, many of these solutions will achieve. I would say that the separation part, and I think we've got some great government solutions as well. Some of the is that we are also going to have issues that address supply. Ultimately, a lot of the problem is because we have more people than housing. We need to get more housing built to solve that solution.
Thank you, Philip. So we now know what it looks like. And Philip, you were the guinea pig when your mic gets cut off. I'll turn it now to Allison for the Liberal Party.
Thank you. This is an issue that I am familiar with. I've done volunteer work in this area and also as part of my professional career. As a result, I know that the need for affordable housing in Northumberland County is at a crisis level. We have dedicated and creative folks who are working to solve the problems, but unfortunately, there isn't much we can do if we don't have the stock. We need to create more affordable housing units and more units in general so that we can get people into homes. The Liberal government is proposing a $4 billion housing accelerator fund, which will target investing in building new homes and specifically working with municipalities to streamline the process so that we can get building done faster. I also like looking at more creative approaches to solving the problem of the lack of stock. I like to see municipalities and the federal government working in collaboration. One of the things that the Liberals are proposing as well is a multi-generational living tax credit. So if a family wants to live together with different generations, then there'll be tax credits available if they need to modify their home to accommodate this. So we need to be looking at creative solutions that might solve the problem in a different way. Another good example is rather than building new homes, let's invest in renovating them so that individuals who have homes have funding from the federal government to renovate those homes so that they can stay living there for longer.
Thank you, Allison. I'll now turn it over to Kim, representing the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. The need for affordable housing in Northumberland has so many different factors that we have to consider when we're talking about it. A lack of mental health and addiction resources, the need for full-time jobs that pay a living wage, the accompanying need for affordable childcare for those who have children, the insufficient amount of money that those with disabilities and so many seniors are expected to survive on, and of course the obvious lack of available housing of any kind, and the resulting increasing in rental costs for what little is actually available. And these issues are so intertwined that the housing issue in our county can't be solved simply by addressing housing alone. All of the factors have to be taken into consideration to have a good, sound strategy. Our government does have a plan in place to address all of this, starting with a minimum of 500,000 units of affordable housing, which will focus on co-ops, social housing, and nonprofit housing. And to get building started as quickly as possible, we will be dedicating Fast Start funds to streamline that application process and help communities get the help that they need to get started right away instead of a few years down. Portion of the HST on the construction of new affordable rental units, which will help get additional new units built faster and keep them affordable long term. We'll be redirecting unused and underused federal properties for housing and to help in the short term. We're going to provide immediate relief with a rental subsidy for those who are already living in overpriced housing, because that's a huge issue as well. If elected as your MP, I will advocate for our riding to make sure our residents benefit from these projects, as well as the funding for healthcare, childcare, and livable incomes.
Thank you, Kim. And now to Nathan from the People's Party of Canada.
Thanks, Neil. I think we all know there's a housing affordability issue in Canada. Home prices and rental prices are both increasing while wages stay relatively stagnant. Cost of living is also rising, and that makes it more difficult for Canadians to save money. I think it is important to address the role of federal government in housing, because housing is primarily a provincial and local issue. And so while we want to, of course, whichever one of us is elected, address the issues that are primary importance to the people of Northumberland, of which housing is one of those issues, we have to realize that there should be a separation between each level of government so that the government can operate efficiently and effectively. And so, in our opinion, the federal government's role should be focused on creating economic conditions which allow people to save money and make money so they can afford houses. So we have a number of policies which will help with this. One of them is changing the inflation target of the Bank of Canada to 0 and stop printing money. This would dramatically lower or stop inflation, reduce cost of living relative to wages, because inflation doesn't really impact wages. Another policy would be pausing immigration. This would dramatically reduce the consistent increase in demand for housing caused by new immigrants, and Canadians would have a better chance of securing housing themselves. We would also dismantle the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which provides incentives for people to take on debt for houses that they cannot afford, and encourages even higher bidding on houses, exacerbating the problem. We would work to reduce money laundering by foreign investors and also reduce speculative investment by foreign investors. And I think this is something that I agree with the NDP on, as it's in their position. And finally, we would end lockdowns and reduce government restrictions on businesses.
Thank you, Nathan. And now over to Pascal on behalf of Christina for the Green Party.
Good morning. Thank you for your opportunity to be here to speak on behalf of Christina Wilson. I agree with many things that were said before. That's the joy of being the last one to speak about a topic. A few things that, so I won't repeat these things, but a few things that for us would be important would be to look at why we are here today. I think that urban sprawl is a problem. Cities eat farms. We see that. Densification, so definitely would be a great way to stop urban sprawling while creating more affordable housing in communities. It's also a way to save money, less roads, less utilities to bring to these developments and everything. But it has to be appealing for people that currently own a house to convert into perhaps a bi-generational or a small multi-unit building. And right now, there's very little incentive for someone who decides to occupy a triplex or a fourplex or something like this. From a tax level, if you are a successful self-employed person and you're lucky enough to make $225,000 in your year, you'll be taxed on your rental income at 54%. If you're a multinational corporation owning hundreds of units, you'll be paying the corporate tax rate on these things, which is significantly lower depending on the tier from what an owner occupying a fourplex would be paying if that owner is lucky enough to be making a big chunk of money on that year. So when you look at something like this, this is a situation created by the two ruling parties for the last 100 whatever years, a huge fiscal fairness issue for people that are trying to improve their situation by having 2-3 units that they'll be able to rent out and make money with. So that is a way.
So we've gone through our first question and you've gotten a sense of how quickly 2 minutes can go. Moving to the second prepared question. If your party wins, will you maintain the current commitment to end chronic homelessness? And if so, what would be your strategy and timeline to do so? And Allison, you have the opportunity to respond to this question first.
Thank you. The Liberal government was the first government in Canada to implement a national housing strategy. This was a 10-year plan to invest $72 billion in creating more housing and addressing chronic homelessness. And we made an announcement in 2017 that we would reduce chronic homelessness by 50%, and we got to work. We introduced 1,200 projects and helped over 1 million people find housing. This past fall, we took the bold step of initializing a plan to move to eliminate chronic homelessness altogether. To that end, we will appoint a new federal housing advocate within the first 100 days of a new mandate to ensure that this important work continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And now to Kim.
Thank you. The NDP are absolutely committed to ending chronic homelessness. And the key to this is addressing the root of the issues that most frequently are interwoven with homelessness. So mental health, addiction, and domestic violence. We plan to expand our health services to include mental health coverage and ensure that everyone has access to care, regardless of their location. We'll be investing in additional resources, hiring more mental health professionals, and increasing access with innovative solutions such as virtual care so that even people with transportation or mobility issues will have more options. Our plan for universal pharmacare will ensure that those who need medications will be able to get them. To help those that are stuck in the vicious cycle of addiction, we will declare a public health emergency and work with all levels of government and health experts to end the criminalization and stigma of drug addiction so that people can get the help they need without fear of arrest. We'll work with provinces and health professionals to create a safe supply of medically regulated alternatives to toxic street drugs, support overdose prevention sites, and expand access to treatment on demand so that it is readily available when it's needed, not when a bed becomes available. Domestic violence is another major factor in homelessness, especially for marginalized communities. For example, members of the 2S LGBTQI+ community are disproportionately affected by both domestic violence and homelessness, and to an even greater degree if they are Indigenous or people of color. The NDP will be implementing a national action plan to address domestic violence, including funding for shelters and other support services to assist residents and help to keep a roof over their heads. There's no one particular answer. It has to be looked at as a whole in order to help fix the problem.
Thank you, Kim. And Nathan.
So government after government, and not just limited to Canada, but across the world, has made commitments to end homelessness, and they've all failed because we have homelessness everywhere. And the reason for this is that governments cannot end homelessness. They're not capable of doing that. And the reason for that is that homelessness isn't a housing problem, it's a drug problem. And drug problems are very complicated. It's not something you can just tackle. You can't convince people not to use drugs that they're addicted to, right? But again, the best we can do as a federal government is put in place the economic conditions that allow people to do what they want to, because drug issues are often caused by a sense of despondency, despair, inability to achieve what one wants to achieve in life, possibly feelings of hopelessness, and by creating economic conditions that allow people to make more money by opening businesses back up in an unrestricted manner, and also reducing taxes, allowing people to keep more of their wealth. This will allow people to achieve their dreams and not have to rely on drugs as to console themselves, basically. So that's not a perfect solution to solving the drug issues, but that's really the best we can do to combat homelessness.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. And to Pascal.
I agree with many things that were said regarding, how to reach people with addictions, mental health issues, and things like this. However, we have to look at a new kind of homelessness as well. Recently, we were out west traveling and we were talking with our waitress. She makes 18 bucks an hour plus tips, and she lives in her car because there is nowhere for her to rent an apartment where she works. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. People that have decent paying jobs that simply, and they're looking for a place to live. They have the money for a place to live, but it's not there. There's no option for them. So while we can, put in place many programs like described by Kim or by Nathan, and I'm sure like Alison and Philip will describe as well, we also have to look at the fact that in some cases, homelessness is simply caused by the fact that no one wants to buy or to build a place where to rent out to other people. And that's something that we should look into and see how we can create more incentives for, especially in small communities where no one is going to build, a 100 unit building to rent out, how we can create incentives in these smaller communities to make sure that there are places that are affordable for people living and working there to live.
Thank you, Pascal. And over to Philip.
Thanks very much. And Megan, I think you'd make a great Speaker of the House. But housing and homelessness is, of course, an extremely serious issue. And it's really dogged our country for decades, if not from the very beginning. When we look at homelessness, we have to be bold and brave and unafraid to be innovative when we look at potential solutions. We would, as a government, look to re-implement the housing first solution. If in fact someone doesn't have a house, they'll have a very difficult time acquiring employment, a difficult time perhaps picking a substance abuse program, maybe even leaving an abusive spouse. And so we need to get people housed first. Secondly, we need to tackle the underlying issues. I really agree with what Ms. MacArthur Jackson said, that there are always underlying issues. People, there are individuals who are struggling with mental health issues. There are issues who are struggling with substance abuse programs. So an Aaron O'Toole government would invest hundreds of millions of dollars in getting new rehabilitation centers so that people can recover. We'll also invest hundreds of millions of dollars in mental health to make sure that people get the support and need and know that they're loved. We'll continue to increase the housing supply by having 1 million new homes built. And so we are absolutely committed to doing everything we can to end chronic homelessness that has dogged us over our more than 100-year history.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, candidates, for your responses to that second question. Moving to the third question, if elected, what would your party do to increase the supply of affordable housing geared to people's income? And Kim, you have the opportunity to answer first on this question.
Thank you. I think this requires a two-part solution. The NDP, of course, is committed to increasing access to income-based housing as part of our previously mentioned housing program. But we're also committed to ensuring that people have a livable income to begin with. Seniors and folks with disabilities shouldn't be in a position where they're forced to live under the poverty level. And we'll work to expand all income security programs to ensure that everyone has access to a guaranteed livable basic income. In addition to this, we believe that everyone deserves a living wage. So we'll be implementing a federal minimum wage starting at $15 an hour and rising to $20 an hour, indexed to the cost of living. Combining that with $10 childcare, our pharmacare and dental care programs, people will have more money in their pockets to be able to cover their day-to-day expenses without struggling. So in addition to building the housing that is required that I was talking about earlier, making sure that people have money in their pockets to be able to afford their day-to-day needs is going to be key. It's a two-part process.
Thank you, Kim. I'm turning to Nathan now.
Yeah, so it isn't really the federal government's role to build or rent houses. This is best left to private developers, and we should put in place conditions where they have the ability to develop areas so that people can have houses. And we intend to housing prices and rent, and put in place conditions so that people can earn what they want to, what they're able to, and keep more of their wealth by reducing taxes. Socialized housing doesn't really work. It causes, it brings crime to areas. It's not a desirable place to live. If you create socialized housing, people can't build equity when they're with their homes. It's just sort of a placeholder. And the sort of people who are desperate enough to basically to resort to those socialized housing options are often homeless people. And going back to homelessness, it's a drug problem. You can put homeless people in houses of that kind, socialized housing, but they're going to leave because there's no drugs there. And that is their priority, is to get drugs. And this is why it hasn't worked. The socialized housing projects have been tried across the country, in the States, and other countries, and it does not solve homelessness. It creates high crime areas, and it's not a desirable place to live.
Thank you, Nathan. Pascal.
I would tend to disagree a little bit with Mr. Lang. I'm not sure that I know people that live in social housing. One lady I know, early 60s, worked as a waitress all her life. I don't believe she does drugs. That's all she can afford. She raised a couple of kids on her own, and sure, she smokes, but that's pretty much the extent of her vice. And this woman without social housing, I don't know where she'd be today. She pays $600 a month for a 3-bedroom unit. There is nowhere else she would ever be able to find a place to live. So there is a place, I believe, for social housing in our communities. I'm not sure that promoters, large promoters, deserve more incentive. I also know people that own companies that have hundreds of units. These guys don't need an incentive. They make millions every month. They usually live in their penthouse in California, something like that. And I don't believe we need to help them more. I think we need to help the guy or the family that wants to build a triplex or a fourplex in a small communities, and perhaps provide affordable housing through that small building, as well as helping this family build wealth through private ownership of a place or a building that has a positive impact in the community. That's how I believe that we should be, that's what where the focus should be, to bring affordable housing to our communities.
Thank you, Pascal. Philip.
Thanks very much. I want to just tell a story of one of the sons of my constituencies. This gentleman refers to himself, and it's not pejorative, this is how he refers to himself, as the co-op kid. He grew up in co-op housing. He went to become an Olympian, won a gold medal, multiple gold medals, I believe, for Canada in kayaking. He's now currently a member of parliament. His name's Adam Van Couverden. And Adam will tell you, one of my friends, and Adam will tell you that one of the reasons why he was able to be successful in order to become an Olympian, for his mom to afford the kayak lessons that he needed, was because of co-op housing. So I believe, as I said in this debate last year, that the society will be judged by how we treat our most vulnerable. So to that end, the Conservative government will take a look at the excess office building, particularly those held by the federal government of Canada. We are the largest property holder in the country, and we'll look to see if there's not the opportunity to convert some of those buildings into high quality, affordable housing geared to income. So that people like Adam Van Couverden will have the opportunity to succeed, because every child deserves to be successful in Canada.
Thank you, Philip. Allison.
So I can't resist noting that Adam Van Couverden did in fact grow up to become a Liberal member of Parliament. And that certainly reflects the Liberal value of ensuring that everybody has a secure, affordable place to live. We will continue to work with municipalities to build greater housing supply. I already mentioned our Housing Accelerator Fund, which is a $4 billion fund to ensure that there is access to affordable rental units. We are on track to create 20,000 new units of affordable rental stock. And we've also reached agreement with the provinces and territories for rental subsidies, being the Canada Housing Benefit Agreement, which again ensure that over 300,000 Canadians can afford to pay their rent. I'd also like to note the National Co-Investment Fund, which is a part of the Liberals' plan, and they will be permanently increasing funding to that to the tune of $2.7 billion over 4 years. And that will encourage investment in cooperative housing. So again, as I mentioned at the outset, we're looking at creative ways to ensure that people have homes that they can afford to live in and rent that they can afford to pay. I also think we need to look at public-private partnerships. Some of the speakers have mentioned lack of incentive for private companies to build affordable housing, and I don't necessarily think that's true. When we work together collaboratively, we can see that. And in Cobourg, a good example is the Balder Corporation, which is in the process of building units that are affordable in collaboration with federal funds. So I think that's really important to remember.
Thank you, Allison. Moving to our fourth question. The question is, what is your understanding of the practice of renovictions, both locally and nationally, and how would your party address this practice? Nathan.
So I assume by renovictions, we're talking about instances where tenants are evicted, so the homeowner or the landlord can complete renovations. This isn't a political issue, quite simply. Going back again to the role of government, this is an absolutely micro issue, and it certainly wouldn't be the federal government's role to address this. But rental agreements are contracts between the landlord and the tenant, and they need to resolve it between themselves. And this can be done just directly, amicably between themselves, or they can take it to court, or they can take it to the landlord-tenant board, which we know in Ontario is heavily biased towards tenants. So this is just something that the federal government does not need to be involved in.
Thank you, Nathan. Pascal.
Nathan is right on one thing. That's a provincial jurisdiction, matter. As far as I'm concerned, for me, provincial tenant boards across the country, they're not biased. They're broken, all of them. They protect bad tenants and bad landlords as well. It's not normal that you have to wait a year, whether you're a tenant or a landlord, to actually be able to get results from this organization. Specifically about renoviction, it should never be a tenant board as a lawyer and 3 lawyers on the board. For me, renovictions should not involve the court system. If you want to apply for a renoviction, and as a tenant, you receive a notice, you should be able to call a number, have an inspector show up, look at your place. Are there structural issues? Is there mold? Is there a real problem that justifies an eviction? Or is it just a paint job in a kitchen or replacing a window or something like this? Instead of going through courts and spending months or even years for something like this, this could be addressed and assessed by an inspector in the matter of a couple of hours. A couple of weeks later, you have a decision. You're wrong, you're right, move on. It should not be something that should be systemized the way it is right now.
Thank you, Pascal. Philip.
Thanks very much. I actually agree with a lot of what Pascal said there. Having appeared actually at the tribunal there and argued before the Tenant Protection Act when I was practicing law, I can tell you the system is very challenging for tenants and landlords alike. And I think there are some real opportunities for success. And I think the federal government does have a role here in whatever way we can to partner with the provinces to ensure that landlords do not manipulate provisions in the Tenant Protection Act, such as the ones that allow renovations. Or there's also provisions where if the landlord wants to move in themselves, they can also evict. That's also been abused in the past. So there's a real opportunity to do better and be better. And we have to be so careful when we are disrupting someone's housing situation before we take any type of specific issue. So when in doubt, I think we should always side on keeping people housed, but obviously we don't want manipulation on either side of the legislation.
Thank you, Philip. Allison.
As some of the candidates have indicated, of course, this does fall within provincial jurisdiction, so we have to be, we're limited in what the federal government can achieve. What the Liberal government is proposing to deal with this specific issue is actually to use the Income Tax Act to attempt to minimize the effect of rent evictions. And what they're proposing is that landlords will have to declare their rental income pre and post renovation. And if the increase is excessive, then there'll be a surtax added. So that's a creative solution to address it from in a way that does fall within federal jurisdiction. And I think perhaps the larger issue that's at play here, it's not just rent evictions, it's generally the fact that the nature of our housing market is such that it becomes more beneficial for landlords to sell properties at for more money rather than leaving them as rentals. The Conservative plan, I note, does actually provide a tax incentive for landlords to defer capital gains. So if they're buying new rental stock. So I'm not sure that the Conservative platform really addresses this issue. Rather, I think we need to look at where is the money coming from. The Liberals are looking at banning foreign ownership of residential properties if it can't be shown that within 2 years the owner will be using it for residential purposes. Also, they're suggesting a tax on house flippers, so that if you're not living in a house as your residence, you're just buying it, flipping it, and moving on to the next one, there will be a tax. So we're looking at the broader problem of the skyrocketing housing market and addressing it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Kim.
Rent evictions have definitely become a major problem. Many landlords are using this as a loophole in order to force renters out and allow them to increase the rent above the allowable amounts that are established under the provincial landlord and tenant acts. One way they've been able to exploit this loophole is by accessing lending through CMHC insured mortgages, which does fall under federal jurisdiction. So this is a loophole that we want to close by updating CMHC policies to focus on lending to homeowners as opposed to those who are purchasing or refinancing investment properties. This will also help to cool down the housing market, along with implementing a 20% levy on foreign buyers, so that we can ensure housing is primarily available to those living in Canada and not people simply looking to invest in investment properties. We're also, of course, going to support our provincial counterparts who are fighting to end vacancy decontrol. That'll prevent landlords from being able to hike the rent as much as they like between tenants, which will effectively end rent evictions if successful. And one way we can do this is by tying federal funding to very specific requirements to ensure that the money is both going to where it is needed and keeping rent affordable for the long term, not just for the short term.
Thank you, Kim. And turning to our final question for our candidates. The right to adequate housing is recognized in international human rights law as part of the right to an adequate standard of living. How will your party ensure that this right is translated into policy so that all Canadians have access to adequate housing? Pascal.
This question shows an interesting paradox. Canada has one of the highest rate of single sole proprietor ownership in housing. This means that we are one of the countries where we have the highest proportion of people that actually own their home or live in a home that they own. At the same time, we have a growing housing crisis. So it shows a huge paradox between an achievement we've had over time and a situation that is growing or has been growing in the past couple of years. It's also showing an opportunity. If the people that own a house are willing or are interested in turning their place into adding a secondary unit or perhaps 2 more units or something like this. In Toronto, 1 out of 6 houses has a secondary unit. That's 75,000 units in Toronto only. This is the way. It's densification. It's helping people make more money that already own a home. your house, if your house works for you, you are ahead in life. I understand that it doesn't resolve many issues where, where people being priced out of the market might not be able to benefit from something like this, but there are many ways to fix the problem and to reduce homelessness. I feel like we overlook too often, the potential that people that already own a home could bring to the solution.
Thank you, Pascal. Philip.
Thank you. Yeah, we've certainly seen challenges, and unfortunately, over the past 6 years, it certainly hasn't gotten better. Talking to many of the advocates for affordable housing, it's more difficult than ever for Northumberland, Peterborough South people to get the housing that they require. And so, as I said, we will continue to invest in affordable housing by looking at government-held properties, by looking at office space, by having innovative solutions, working with the builders of houses. And some of this answer has to come from the private sector. We just don't have the capacity to build all these houses by the government. And so by encouraging and incentivizing our developers to build more houses or to renovate houses as well, we have the opportunity to finally get ahead of this crisis after 6 years of unfortunate inaction. The other part of it is we do have an affordability crisis that has occurred over the last 6 years. Everything is far more expensive than it was 6 years ago, including housing. We've seen houses go up by 50, 100% over the past 6 years. We need to look at the economic policy, and we need a prime minister who doesn't say, I don't care about monetary policy, because when you're saying that, you're saying, I don't care about housing prices, because monetary policy has a direct impact. So we will always take care of the most vulnerable, and we will be great stewards of the economy to make sure that life is affordable again in Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Thank you, Philip. Allison.
So to address the question head on, the Liberals have recognized that housing is a right that Canadians have. In our National Housing Strategy Act, we confirmed that this is a right that we are taking seriously and that we acknowledge. And so I think that's important because it informs the approach that the Liberal government has taken to housing. All you have to do is look at our platform in this election to see what a major component of our platform housing is. And we look at it across the spectrum. So it's not just a matter of affordable housing for one sector of the population. We look at housing for seniors. So for example, the Liberals are creating a tax credit for seniors who need to renovate their homes so that they can stay living in them longer. That's one thing. We're also looking at affordability for first-time home buyers. There are a myriad of provisions in the Liberal platform to assure that first-time home buyers can get into the housing market despite how prices have escalated. And then, of course, the affordability issues that we've discussed already here today. So I think the fact that we've taken such an overarching view of the problem in society shows how important it is to the Liberal government and how we do, in fact, have a plan to address it at every level.
Thank you, Allison. Kim.
Thank you. Building more affordable housing is definitely a key part of our plan to provide affordable housing, as well as providing incentives to the private sector so that they will also build more affordable housing and keep it affordable for the long term. But so is increasing access to ownership. We want to make sure that people have the option to purchase their own homes if that is something that they want to do. We can accomplish this by updating lending policies for CMHC insured mortgages to allow for more innovative paths to home ownership, such as co-ownership options for intergenerational families, rent-to-own options, extending the amortization option for first-time home buyers so that they can get their foot in the door and start building some equity to move their way up in the housing market. If we have more people purchasing homes, there will be more rental units available for renters, which along with the new units being built under our affordable housing plan that will help to cool the rental market down and keep it more affordable for renters. So it really is, you know, as with, I know I said this in a number of my responses, but it really is a multi-pronged approach. We have to make sure that we're looking at all of the different factors and basically that we can make sure that everybody is benefiting and everybody has the ability to access the type of housing that they want and need.
Thank you, Kim. And Nathan.
Just to reiterate, our policies are going to focus on creating the general economic conditions to allow people to be successful and afford housing, specifically reducing personal income taxes, reducing inflation and stopping printing money, and also ending COVID restrictions, which are preventing people from working to the extent that they want to. I do want to tie a few things in because I think both Allison and Kim had good points on from their platforms. So with respect to Allison's point on banning foreign ownership, that'd certainly be something I support as well. I think it helps prioritize ownership by Canadians, reduces overall demand for housing in Canada, and falls in line with federal government's role of prioritizing the well-being of Canadians. And with respect to Kim's point about a 20% levy on certain properties, I certainly support that too. Our country's hugely in debt, and levying this tax would not only help increase tax revenues while not penalizing Canadians for it, but help incentivize foreign owners to either rent or sell to Canadians. Last thing would be that I'd like to mention is if you have a criminal record, it's harder to find a job and to obtain, to find a place to rent or buy. And because, as we've discussed already, many homeless people are chronic drug users. I think decriminalization of certain drugs would be very beneficial, as there'd be a bunch of people who then don't have criminal records, and it wouldn't inhibit them from getting a job so they can afford some kind of rental property, and also, so they can earn money and afford rent.
Thank you, Nathan. We've come to the end of the predetermined questions that have been developed by the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee. And so we now turn to questions that have been arriving on the floor, again, through the question and answer function. I should note that if your question doesn't get directly answered this morning during our time together, that I would encourage you to contact the candidates directly with your questions so that you can get a response to that. But hopefully we can get through most of the questions. I'm not sure if these display for the audience members, but if not, I know that Megan will put them in the chat panel for you to see. The first question comes from Missy McLean, and her question is, we often hear about the financialization of housing and its implications in big cities, but it's not always clear how it also affects housing and affordability in communities like Northumberland County. Would the candidates please share their understanding of how the financialization of housing and how it connects to the housing crisis in Northumberland County, and what they and their parties will do to address it? So this is an open question, open to the floor. Is there anyone who would like to take the first stab at it? And you have 1 minute to respond to these. Megan, if we can put that question in the chat panel so that the candidates can see it and refer to it, that would probably be helpful. I don't know if they see that in the Q&A panel.
Can we just clarify if by financialization of houses, we mean using equity on your house as an ATM?
I don't want to interpret what Missy might be saying, and so I would say for you to give your understanding of what you think that means. I'll allow Kim to go first and then Philip. So 1 minute to respond here.
Hopefully I'm not misunderstanding what the question is asking. My interpretation of it was that the financialization of housing, referring more to how it's more or less being used as an investment for people, as opposed to a need and a requirement for people. And it's absolutely affecting not only the big cities, but smaller communities as well. And I think what we need to do is we need to look at housing as a human right as opposed to housing as an investment. I mean, if people can build affordable housing and ensure that it's affordable and make a profit from it, and therefore it's an investment, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely a place for that. But the primary focus needs to be on affordability and on people being able to actually have somewhere to live, not on investment return.
On much the same course or trajectory as Ms. MacArthur Jackson, we fundamentally believe that homes are places to be lived in. And to that end, we will be studying and be working to put in place limitations on speculation, particularly foreign speculation on houses. We believe that houses should be, once again, places where people live. And I can tell you firsthand, I've seen it firsthand, it has impacted our house pricing here in Northumberland, Peterborough South. And so we need to, once again, refocus housing on being the places where children grow up, where people retire, and not necessarily as a investment vehicle.
Allison, yeah.
I think I addressed some of these issues in an earlier answer about ways to limit the fact that house prices are skyrocketing. But one that I didn't mention is the real estate investment trusts. These are big companies that buy up real estate and then rent them out. So one of the things that the Liberal government is committed to doing is looking at the taxation of these entities to ensure that they're being fairly taxed, because in a lot of ways, I think that is, to use Kim's point, is looking at housing as a commodity rather than an investment in a home. So I think that's another element of the Liberal platform that will address that. I can guarantee, I mean, I practice residential real estate as my job. So I have seen housing prices escalate, and I have seen how people are making decisions based on the rising cost of housing. So it very much is an issue that is affecting folks here in this riding.
Pascal.
I agree with everything that's been said by the previous participants. My only comment would be, we've been telling people for 50 years, invest in a house, it's your retirement. So in a way, these people that we've been promising, a sunny retirement based on the fact that they bought a house, they deserve to be able to sell their house and make a good profit today. It doesn't mean that we cannot value affordable, housing, and that we cannot build affordable housing. We'll just have to be careful not to renegade the promise that society made to these people by, taxing capital gain, for example, on a single family home. So we have to be careful about that. For the point made about real estate investment trust, I'm glad to hear that, but it's not a new thing. The fact that these companies have been paying very little taxes while amassing immense wealth is not something new. So I feel like the Liberal
Yeah, and that's time. I'm going to allow Nathan to respond to this, as he hasn't responded yet.
Yeah, so I think, as Philip mentioned, reducing foreign speculation is going to be very important. So because, many rental investment properties in Canada are owned by foreign owners. And I don't think it's appropriate to start restricting Canadians' ability to buy real estate, because I think that's not a good direction to go in. But we can certainly make progress by reducing foreign ownership and creating incentives for foreign investors to sell or rent to Canadians.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. All 5 candidates have responded to the question. I see that Kim and Allison have further things they want to say, and we don't actually have provisions for that, but I am looking at the questions that are coming in. And so in encouraging debate on an issue, I am going to allow you a further response, but you're going to be limited in your time to 30 seconds at this point. So timekeepers, it's 30 seconds. I'll allow Kim and then Allison. That's how I see you on my screen. So Kim.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the point that I made earlier when I was talking about housing being treated as an investment. It absolutely is an investment for individuals when they buy their home and they're putting money into it in order to increase the value. That is absolutely not something that I'm detracting from in any way. It's the practice of buying homes in order to flip them and as an investment vehicle, as opposed to an investment in ourselves.
Alice.
Thanks for the opportunity. Mr. Bearbay's comments were starting to skirt around an issue that has been floating throughout this election that is categorically untrue, which is that the Liberals will be taxing capital. That is not true. This is false information. And I just wanted to be completely clear that that is not the intention. That is not what the Liberal government will be doing. We're talking about an anti-flipping tax, not a capital gain on the homes that people have lived in as their residences.
Pascal, do you want to respond to that? 30 seconds.
I did not say that the Liberal government was going to tax capital gain on primary houses. What I said is that basically looking into taxing real estate investment trust is not something that should be a new idea.
Thank you. Our next question is from Judy, and it's directed towards Allison. So Allison, you'll have, this is to you. If other candidates wish to respond or have something to say afterwards, they'll have that opportunity. The question that Judy has for you, Allison, is this. Why are we still in this crisis when the Liberals brought in the much lauded National Housing Strategy in 2019 with $40 billion for affordable housing and repairs? Please tell us where this money went.
So the short answer is this is a really big job. And the Liberals got to work in 2019 and continued working. I'm happy to sit here and list the money that has been spent. We've created 9,200 units through our Rapid Housing Initiative. Over 2 million Canadians have new places to live as a result of the National Housing Strategy. It's very easy to criticize what has or hasn't been done, but we must all remember that there was a global pandemic that struck us. And so we have to balance the competing interests. And there is a lot of work to be done. The Liberals have demonstrated through their platform that they are committed to continuing this important work. And I think the track record speaks for itself.
Allison. Philip, you want to comment?
Yeah, just with respect, I think the track record does speak for itself. The housing situation in Northumberland and Peterborough South has not improved over the last 6 years. And yes, billions have been spent, but that's not a cause for celebration. What would be a cause for celebration would be if our occupancy rate decreased from 99% to 95% or 90%. We don't need further dollars. We don't need further complications, further excuses. What we need is results. People need housing in Northumberland and Peterborough South.
Kim.
I just want to follow up on that a bit and point out that our local member of parliament during that time wasn't the Liberal government, it was Mr. Lawrence. So if we haven't seen a benefit to our community, what are you doing to change that?
Pascal?
Locally, there are two projects that I find very interesting to compare. The first one is the one on University Avenue, creating 71 new units, including 13 affordable units, for which the federal government lent $15 million to allow for the construction of this project. The other one is a new project. It's not done yet. It involves many organizations that are organizing this panel today. For me, on one side, we have a project where a rich corporation is going to get richer through federal funding. And on the other hand, we have a project where that's community driven, that will benefit the community. It's controlled by the community. The pricing will be able to be managed by the community that's building it as well. This to me is a great example of a great project. Maybe the federal government will finance this project as well. I don't know, I don't have all the details. But if you're asking me what kind of project the Green Party would get behind and not only support, but promote, that's a great project that we will be happy to support and hopefully replicate in
Thank you, Pascal. Philip, I'll allow you 30 seconds to respond.
Completely fair criticism, Ms. McArthur-Jackson, but I will say I worked hard to advocate for this community and brought millions and millions of dollars home to our community, including for housing. However, there are larger economic policies such as monetary policy, affordability issues that unfortunately, as a local member of parliament for a year and a half, I have had the opportunity to address, but wait, give us 4 years.
And Nathan, as you haven't responded yet, you still have a full minute to respond to this initial question.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what I was saying earlier. This isn't something that the government can solve. Like, some of these plans sound great, they don't work. It just doesn't happen. It's not a crisis that the government can directly solve by spending money. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of money spent and it doesn't solve the problem.
Moving to our a final question that's been submitted, and then we'll move to closing remarks. This is for the individual wishes to remain anonymous, but the question that they are asking is, will your government implement a residential tenant support benefit to address the arrears and evictions crisis facing tenants who lost income during the pandemic? Yes, Pascal.
The answer is yes. It's part of our platform. It's a commitment we have. And for me, this is a great way to address a situation where if you can't pay your rent for you lost your job or whatever reason, it should not become a conflict unless it's chronic and you can never pay your rent. If a special event happens in your life and you can no longer pay your rent, taking your landlord to court or having a landlord dragging you into court is not the solution. Having a short-term support to help you cover your rent while you figure out your life, basically, or what's your next step is the right solution.
Kim.
This is absolutely something that we're looking at. We want to make sure that people who are already in overpriced housing have the ability to be able to continue to live while they're waiting for the affordable housing to be built, because of course that's not it's not a couple-day process. It is going to take some time. So one of the things that we are implementing is a subsidy to help people who are currently in overpriced housing, to help with arrears, to help with the potential for evictions, and make sure that in the short term, while people are waiting, they have access to funds to make sure that they're okay for the time being.
Did anyone else want to address that question? Allison?
Well, I think I would be remiss if I didn't remind folks at this time that it was in fact our Liberal government that provided the CERB and the CURB benefits so that people during the pandemic could continue and we didn't have mass loss of housing. This protected millions upon millions of Canadians. And I think it's important that in this election, we don't lose sight of the fact that the Liberal government acted swiftly and decisively to protect those people, being Canadians, when they needed it the most.
Kim?
Just for a quick point of clarity, of course, it was a minority government. It was not only the Liberal government that accomplished this, there were other parties involved as well. So it was not solely a Liberal. The NDP pushed really hard to make sure that the amounts that were going to be available for CERB were increased, because originally they were looking to be very low and not terribly helpful. And one of the things that we did was push to have that increased so that people would have access to funds they needed.
Thanks, Kim. Nathan?
So I think a lot of people see it as a almost foregone conclusion that people lost income because of the pandemic, but people lost income because the government prevented them from working. So rather than do this, we would like to open things back up so that people can earn income again to the extent that they wish to.
I'll allow Allison a 30-second response. And there was one additional question that came in that I'd like to have addressed, and then we'll move to closing remarks, and we'll be pushing our time limit here. So please be concise.
Just very quick, sort of to build on Kim's point that, of course, when the Liberals were looking to extend the CURB and the CERB, our current member of Parliament, Mr. Lawrence, voted against it.
Go ahead, Philip.
Thank you very much. What I voted against was excess liberal spending. A conservative government is committed to extending these programs to when people need them. But we weren't committed to spending billions of dollars as a blank check with a government that has failed repeatedly over the last 6 years to deliver in housing, deliver in any new number of facets. We need a change, and now's the time.
Our final question that we're going to take before we go to the closing remarks is from Jacqueline Pennington. It's directed towards you, Philip. Philip, you've made numerous references to protecting and advocating to the most vulnerable population within this discussion, yet your track record when it comes to speaking up for the vulnerable members of Northumberland, Peterborough South is once elected, you would go back on that word. How can we trust that you won't go housing that you are now claiming here?
Thank you very much, and I would disagree with the premise of that comment. I have stood up repeatedly for the most vulnerable in our population, including voting for C6, which was a ban on conversion therapy. And unlike a liberal government, which has failed to put in place that ban, a conservative government will put in place a ban on conversion therapy. Secondly, we've also stood up against the homophobic blood ban, which has continued on for the past 6 years. A conservative government will repeal that blood ban and make sure, regardless of who you are, you will have the right to give blood like every other Canadian. Conservatives celebrate diversity, and we will always stand up for everyone's rights.
I see your hand there, Alice. I'm just going to note that we are at 20 after 11 and we still have closing remarks. So I'm going to ask if you can just keep to 30 seconds here.
Thank you. Well, it's true that Mr. Lawrence did in fact vote in favor of the ban on conversion therapy. That was after he had supported a petition which encouraged individuals to disobey the law should it come into place. That was the petition that he put before the House of Commons, putting that notion into the House of Parliament. And I would go so far as to suggest that he voted against for the bill because of the
Philip, you'll have 30 seconds here to rebut, and then we're going to move to closing remarks.
Thank you. So that's just an untrue statement. I did not support the petition, and the petition actually did not call for anyone banning the law, both untrue statements.
Thank you to those audience members who've submitted the questions. Thank you to our candidates for responding to them. We had some good debate, some heated debate, which is good. It's good to have some passion on these issues. Now going to move to closing remarks, and we'll take those remarks in the same order as we dealt with the first question. So I'll allow Philip from the Conservative Party to begin.
I would just ask that I be able to finish the debate, as that would make sense as I started. So we flipped the other order. Why would we not flip the order here?
I'm going to confess to the audience that this is the one thing I didn't predetermine with the candidates, which as we were going through the debate, I realized and I wondered if I might end up getting some consternation about the order. Everyone will want the last word here, I am sure. You know, if we were in person, I'd draw lots, or I'd use a funky app I use with my kids to determine who goes first. Kim's got her hand up. I think that means she's willing to speak. Is that?
I'm more than willing to go first. I'm not fussed about the order. I do have closing remarks that I have prepared, of course, and that I want to get to, but there's one quick thing that I just really wanted to address. There was a comment made earlier by the PPC candidate that socialized housing increases crime, and that is simply not true. Studies have shown that poor economic opportunities increase crime, not socialized housing in and of itself. Investing in our communities through education, healthcare, having good jobs, that improves the economic opportunities that people have, and that lowers crime. Getting rid of socialized housing is not going to solve crime, and it's mind-boggling that anybody would think that. So having said that, I know I've kind of wasted a bit of my time, but I did just want to make sure to address that because it's very stigmatizing to people who do live in socialized housing. one thing that the NDP is we are very different. You know, we're everyday working people, much like the residents that we represent. Our entire history, we have fought for better conditions and standards that lift everybody up. We know that when people have access to housing, access to healthcare, access to education, and access to good employment, which kind of goes back to what I was just saying, it benefits the community as a whole. A good standard of living shouldn't be available only to the elite and to the middle class. We have to ensure everybody in our communities have the ability to not only survive, but to thrive in order to be successful as a society. We've seen over the last few elections, politicians who love to say the right thing and to promise to address the issues that matter so much to us, with seemingly little intention of actually delivering on these promises. We've been care about green energy, and so far we have very little to show for it, even outside of the external factor of the pandemic that did kind of set us behind. But even prior to that, we were not seeing a lot of progress. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have a record of fighting for everyday people, for marginalized people, for Indigenous people, instead of big companies and the rich. We've been fighting for you and your family, pushing the current government on supports that helped everyday Canadians and small businesses to get through the pandemic. It's our goal to help everyone to obtain a good standard of living, because we know that when everyone has access to a good standard of living, it benefits the economy, it benefits the community. In short, it benefits us all. On Monday, I hope that you will consider electing me as your MP so that I can fight for the residents of Northumberland, Peterborough South every day. That is my pledge to you, to listen and to fight.
Thank you, Kim. Nathan, you're next, and I remind everyone that we're on closing remarks here.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Kim's comment. I didn't claim that we can solve crime by eliminating social housing, but I do agree that increasing economic opportunities is a way to reduce crime, and that's what our platform aims to do. We don't believe that government spending is the way to do that, though. So I'll reiterate my positions. We would end lockdowns and government restrictions on business activities, allowing people to have more opportunities to realize their potential and earn what they need to in order to buy houses. We would change the Bank of Canada inflation target to 0%. We would stop printing money. We would pause immigration to reduce demand for housing and allow Canadians a better chance at securing housing. We would dismantle the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which provides incentives for people to take on debt that they can't afford. And we would work to reduce money laundering by foreign investors in Canadian property markets and reduce speculative buying. Finally, we would reduce personal income taxes, which would allow people at every income level to save more of the money that they earn and put it towards housing in the future. And if you like those policies, please feel free to vote for me on Monday.
Thank you, Nathan. Pascal.
Thank you. To end that debate, very nice debate, by the way, thank you for the opportunity again. There is an amazing opportunity that's presenting itself in our area. There is a youth center that's been closed recently that's sitting on an amazing piece of land, downtown Cobourg, already paid for by taxpayers. I would hate to see this piece of land go to a private developer that would turn that into just another subdivision. This piece of land, if local organizations like the ones organizing this debate want to get involved, presents an amazing opportunity to build small plexes that could be owned individually by single family parents, where you have two 1-bedroom unit, 2 3-bedroom units or something like this built in small buildings that could lift out of poverty people that will be working otherwise will be working all their life very hard without the opportunity to build personal wealth basically. I really hope that, I'm not delusional, I don't believe that the Green Party will win this election, but I really hope that whoever wins this election, as you know, whether it's Christina or any of the other candidates sitting on this debate, will look at this opportunity and throw their support behind that. Things like this don't happen very often, and I believe that for our community, the best way to build affordable housing for up to potentially a few hundred households is right there in front of us. And I really hope that whoever wins for this riding will be able to support something that will not only not make a rich corporation richer, but several small households more comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascal. Now going to Allison.
The Liberal platform introduces a three-part housing plan, unlocking home ownership, building new homes, and protecting the rights of home buyers. This builds on work that has been done over the past 6 years. The Liberals were the first to create a national housing strategy, which was a 10-year plan to invest over $72 billion to build supply, making houses more affordable, and addressing chronic homelessness. The Liberal Party did this because we recognize the right of Canadians to access adequate housing. With provinces and territories totaling $4 billion in cross funding and helping over 300,000 Canadians afford to pay their rent. Going forward, a re-elected Liberal government will invest $4 billion in a new housing accelerator fund to increase supply of houses, including working with municipalities so that development of affordable homes and other creative solutions is possible. We will help renters become homeowners through our rent-to-own program, and we will introduce legislation to curb house speculation and foreign ownership. We've talked a little bit today about when you start to look at problems in society, we can't even begin to solve them without first addressing the fact that every person needs a safe place to call home. The Liberal government sees this, we acknowledge it, and we are committed to doing the work to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Philip.
Perfect. And I would like to thank yourself, Mr. Ellis, Ms. McDonald, and the organizations you're representing for putting on a fabulous debate. I think we've heard some great ideas from all parties, and I look forward to working regardless of what capacity that is forward. If I'm honored and privileged to be a member of Parliament, expect some calls from me, team. I want to hear your ideas. A conservative government has a great plan. We want to have built 1 million new homes. Imagine what that will do. We have a plan to look at the current stock of federal government property and convert some of that to affordable housing. We will always be there to protect the most vulnerable, as every society is ultimately judged by how we take care of those who have the most challenges in their society. But at the same token, we have a plan to rebuild the economy. A place where jobs and houses are plentiful again is not only possible, achievable. We will do it with your support and help. Thanks very much. I'm Philip Lawrence, and I'm asking for your vote on September 20th.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you to each of our candidates who have been here with us today. Pascal on behalf of Christina for the Green Party, Nathan for the People's Party of Canada, Kim for the NDP, Allison, our Liberal candidate, and Philip for the Conservative Party. Thank you for coming today and for sharing your ideas, your thoughts on what your party is prepared to do for the people of this riding and for the people of this country. At this time, I want to call upon Lana Messen, who is the co-chair of the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee, to provide some closing remarks. Lana?
Thank you, Neil. Hello, my name is Lana Messen, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee. My co-chair, Lucy Caldwell, is unfortunately unavailable today, and so it's just me doing the closing remarks. On behalf of the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee, I would like to thank all the candidates today for their time and the commitment to our riding of Northumberland Peterborough South and the constituents within it. And in recognizing the integral need and the importance of housing in our community, and I think we can all agree from today that it is a crisis. I'd like to thank Megan McDonald for her muting abilities backstage here, and to our timekeepers, Melissa, Dawn, and Amy, for keeping us all on track. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending, for caring about affordable housing, and being a part of advocating and awareness for these issues. Housing does not discriminate, and it impacts everyone at some point in our lives. And I especially want to emphasize that whose voices may not always be heard, who may not have a seat at the tables where decisions are made, and that the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee has made an effort to collect those questions and their voices to be represented today. I'd like to thank the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee and all the individuals that sit on it who come together to help organize events such as these and to continue to have the often hard conversations that are needed. The Affordable Housing Committee is a local initiative that's comprised of organizations and volunteers who are interested in affordable housing issues within Northumberland County. And we believe that safe, affordable, and accessible housing is a fundamental right, which we've heard today throughout this conversation, and that affordable housing is essential to quality of life, health, and the economic well-being of our community. We've heard a variety of solutions, approaches, next steps, and platforms this morning with a variety of different policies that all of these candidates are looking forward to bringing. And I wish everyone the best with the rest of their campaign. I want to thank you once again for your time and for your interest and commitment to these issues during this election. And I'm looking forward to the future.
Thank you, Lana. And again, thank you to our candidates for being here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, provided questions, and has an interest in housing in this riding. A question just came through about where will the link for the video be posted. It will be posted initially on the Habitat for Humanity Northumberland's YouTube channel, and then the partner agencies of the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee will share that link on theirs through their social media channels. And so you can all look for that later today. As each of us gets up and rises from the places we happen to be right now, I hope that as you go about your day, that you're kind to one another, and that on Monday you get out and that you vote. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our candidates for participating. Be well.